Welcome to Defense Briefing. The content of the briefing includes: Modi hosts G20 leaders in video meet, but Xi and Biden to skip. Thomas's 17 points and late three-pointer leads Albany over Army 62-59. Israel and Hamas agree on 4-day ceasefire that includes release of 50 hostages. Merle Goldman, noted scholar of Chinese intellectual descent, dies at 92. U.S. launches retaliatory strikes against Iran-backed militants in Iraq. Modi hosts G20 leaders in video meet, but Xi and Biden to skip. Bloomberg. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi will host a virtual meeting of leaders from the Group of 20, G20, on Wednesday, although Chinese President Xi Jinping will not be attending. Instead, Premier Li Qiang will represent China at the meeting. The meeting comes as Modi's term as president of the G20 is ending, during which he sought to enhance India's global influence. A large majority of G20 leaders are expected to attend the virtual meeting. U.S. President Joe Biden will not be attending, while Russian President Vladimir Putin will address the gathering. India hopes to review the progress made during its presidency, which focused on the development of emerging economies. Thomas's 17 points and late three-pointer leads Albany over Army 62-59. Associated Press. Albany secured a 62-59 victory over Army on Tuesday night, with Sebastian Thomas scoring 17 points, including a game-winning three-pointer in the final seconds. Josh Scovens and Blake Barker missed their three-point attempts to tie the game for Army. Thomas shot 6 for 16, including 2 for 6 from three-point range, and made 3 of 5 free throws. Amare Marshall contributed 16 points for Albany, while Aaron Reddish had 16 points for Army. Scovens led Army with 11 points and 2 blocked shots. Israel and Hamas agree on 4-day ceasefire that includes release of 50 hostages. South China Morning Post. Israel's cabinet has approved a temporary ceasefire with Hamas. This is expected to end the 6-week war and free dozens of hostages held captive in the Gaza Strip. The deal calls for a 4-day ceasefire, during which Israel will halt its military offensive and Hamas will free at least 50 of the 240 hostages it currently has. The truce will also allow hundreds of trucks of humanitarian, medical, and fuel aid to enter Gaza. The truce will be extended an extra day for every additional 10 hostages released by Hamas. Merle Goldman, noted scholar of Chinese intellectual descent, dies at 92. Washington Post. Merle Goldman, a 92-year-old scholar of Chinese affairs, has died in Massachusetts. Goldman had Merkel cell carcinoma, a rare skin cancer, according to her son Seth. She wrote more than a dozen books, many of which are considered essential to understanding China's pro-reform movements. Goldman believed that China's rise as a global economic power could eventually lead to Beijing loosening its grip on opposition. She also argued that China's Confucian legacy was inherently incompatible with centralized power and that China's vast middle class might eventually seek its own political voice. Goldman warned that this would not necessarily result in a Western-style democracy, however. She noted that China's freedoms have not increased in the years since she made her argument, with political and media freedoms in Hong Kong being curtailed and restrictions of the Uyghur Muslim minority in Xinjiang province. Further, she noted an increasingly virulent form of nationalism among younger Chinese, supporting crackdowns in Tibet. Goldman's connections in China allowed her to share stories and insights that went beyond geostrategic power plays. U.S. launches retaliatory strikes against Iran-backed militants in Iraq. Yahoo! U.S. forces have carried out a second round of airstrikes in Iraq against Iran and Iran-backed groups involved in attacks against U.S. forces. The strikes were in response to an attack on Tuesday using a close-range ballistic missile. Russia deploys new nuclear missile in Kaluga region RIA. Reuters. Russia has deployed a new Yars intercontinental ballistic missile, ICBM, at a base in the Kaluga region. The Yars missile is capable of carrying multiple thermonuclear warheads and is seen as one of Russia's newer weapons capable of penetrating the missile shield used by the U.S. and its allies. The Kozylsk Regiment, where the missile was loaded into a silo, is the first in Russia's strategic missile forces to upgrade to the silo-based Yars missiles. The missiles were initially deployed in a mobile version. Has the tide turned against the military junta in Myanmar's civil war? ABC. A surprise offensive launched by a coalition of ethnic-based armies and pro-democracy fighters in Myanmar's north has shifted the trajectory of the country's civil war in favor of the resistance, according to analysts. The offensive, known as Operation 1027, saw the Three Brotherhood Alliance seize several towns and border crossings, catching the ruling junta off guard. The alliance's objective was to safeguard civilians, defend their territory, and combat the oppressive military dictatorship. The offensive also aimed to eradicate online gambling scam centers on the Myanmar-China border, with China believed to have given its blessing to the operation. The attacks were described as unprecedented in scope, speed, and the number of groups involved. The scale of the offensive represents the biggest military challenge to the junta's rule and has exposed the vulnerability of the military government. While the conflict is far from over, analysts predict that the junta's forces will collapse in waves across the country, and the junta will face increasing pressure and diminishing support. A growing global footprint for China's space program worries Pentagon. Washington Post. China's growing network of facilities in Latin America and Antarctica for its civilian space and satellite programs has the potential to expand Beijing's global military surveillance network and pose a defense threat, according to U.S. officials. China has built facilities in Venezuela, Peru, Argentina, and Bolivia, and has at least 2 stations under construction in Antarctica. The Chinese-built ground stations are used to maintain uninterrupted communication with satellites and other space vehicles and have the potential to surveil other states' assets passing over the southern hemisphere. They also play an important role in national security, facilitating military communications and tracking missile launches. The U.S. military is concerned that China's ground stations could be used to interfere with or destroy enemy satellites. South Korea to suspend part of military pact after North claims spy satellite launch. Reuters. South Korea has suspended part of a military agreement it signed with North Korea in 2018 after Pyongyang launched a spy satellite. The two sides agreed to impose buffer zones and remove some guard posts from the demilitarized zone, but the agreement has faced increasing scrutiny and calls for it to be suspended or scrapped. South Korea's National Security Council said the move would involve restoring reconnaissance and surveillance operations along the military demarcation line between the countries. The U.S. condemned the launch as a brazen violation of multiple UN Security Council resolutions. Zelensky talks Israel, U.S. elections with Fox's Benjamin Hall, and Ukraine's place among global risks. Yahoo! Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has warned the West not to ignore Russia after acknowledging that the Israel-Hamas conflict is a challenge. Zelensky claimed that Ukraine is at the center of global risks and that Russia will continue to be emboldened by its actions without significant pushback from the global community. Ukraine's setbacks come ahead of the U.S. presidential elections, which will have profound implications for continued support of the war effort. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Dr. Six, your resident observer from the 6 Degrees world, here to bring you the latest news with a touch of humor and insight. So let's dive right into today's stories. First, we have Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi hosting a virtual G20 meeting, but notable absences include Chinese President Xi Jinping and U.S. President Joe Biden. It seems like even world leaders need a break from Zoom calls. Modi has been keen on enhancing India's global influence during his term as G20 president, and this meeting will be a chance to review the progress made in developing emerging economies. In sports news, Albany secured a thrilling victory over Army, thanks to Sebastian Thomas's game-winning three-pointer. It's always impressive to see athletes perform under pressure, and it's moments like these that remind us why we love sports. Moving on to international affairs, Israel and Hamas have agreed to a 4-day ceasefire, which includes the release of 50 hostages. It's a positive step towards ending the 6-week war and providing much-needed relief to the people of Gaza. Let's hope this ceasefire holds and paves the way for a lasting peace in the region. In sad news, renowned scholar Merle Goldman, who focused on Chinese intellectual descent, has passed away at the age of 92. Goldman's work shed light on China's pro-reform movements and the potential for change in the country. While China's rise as an economic power has not led to increased freedoms, Goldman's insights continue to shape our understanding of the country. The U.S. has launched retaliatory strikes against Iran-backed militants in Iraq after an attack on U.S. forces. It seems like tensions in the region are heating up once again, and let's hope cooler heads prevail to avoid further escalation. Meanwhile, Russia has deployed a new nuclear missile capable of carrying multiple warheads. It's a reminder that the arms race is still alive and well, and one can only hope that diplomacy and arms control efforts can keep these weapons in check. In Myanmar, a surprise offensive by pro-democracy fighters has shifted the trajectory of the civil war in favor of the resistance. The junta's rule is facing its biggest military challenge yet, and it's a testament to the resilience and determination of the people fighting for freedom. China's expanding global footprint in its space program is causing concern for the Pentagon. The country's facilities in Latin America and Antarctica have the potential to pose a defense threat, raising questions about China's intentions in space. Who would have thought that space exploration could be so geopolitically charged? South Korea has suspended part of a military agreement with North Korea after the latter launched a spy satellite. It's a reminder that tensions on the Korean peninsula are far from resolved, and the delicate balance between the two countries remains fragile. Lastly, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has warned the West not to ignore Russia, highlighting Ukraine's position as a center of global risks. With the U.S. presidential elections on the horizon, the outcome will have significant implications for Ukraine's war effort and its relationship with Russia. And that wraps up today's news. Remember, folks, knowledge is power, and humor makes it all the more enjoyable. Now it's your turn to join in the discussion. What are your thoughts on these stories? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.